How's it going, everybody? And today we're going to watch Johnny Harris, the leader of disinformation, or when he talks about honest things, he still supports the status quo because he loves the status quo. And today's gonna talk about a topic that I'm involved in called How the US Stole Puerto Rico. As a Puerto Rican, specifically a second-class citizen indigenous person who suffer every day of the horrors of colonialism and imperialism, let's see how he handles the topic, which 9 times out of 10, yeah, it's not gonna be in favor of the struggle for liberation. Let's go. Oh, oh wait, now we have to go fast. Just FBI, so I assume it's the Capertas, which is a thing before COINTERPRO. The origins of COINTERPRO was originally for surveillance independence movement in Puerto Rico and to stop them either by disinformation, torture, assassination, disappearance, murder, or state death squads or state-sponsored terrorism. Yep, that's what got my attention. Yeah, the one time the United States bombed its own citizens, they bombed Jayuya and Utuado during the 1950 revolution for Puerto Rican independence. And that is the Dr. Cornelius Rowe, who did human experimentation of eugenics to exterminate the Puerto Rican people. Instead of being fired, he got promoted as the chief chemist of the U.S. Army. And this is before World War II. We are second class citizens. That is a colony. So far, so good. Yeah, that was one of the images during the revolution. The Ponce Massacre, which is the largest murder spree by the law enforcement in U.S. history, where 19 people died and over 200 were injured. One of those people who killed was a 7-year-old girl who was shot in the back while she was running away from the massacre. Yeah, Dr. Cornelius, this is our own Puerto Rican dollar we used to have till the United States decided to remove it, and by consequence, we every single Puerto Rican lost 40% of their wealth. So we went extremely poor real quick. This is like flyers and stuff. Some of them are very leftist in nature. Yeah. Oh, for fuck's sake. Let's see how they do it. Yeah. Yeah, he straight up worships better help now. Fun fact, he will not talk about this because he's starting with the Spanish American War. There would have been multiple revolutions for independence before this time period. The first one was the first ever revolution in the entirety of Latin America in 1511 by Agüebanat II, the chieftain of the entire island of Puerto Rico, who this is 3 years after they made their first settlement on the island of the settlers. You know, It was originally a success, successfully kicking out the Spaniard, but the war dragged on for a decade and got defeated. Another revolution happened in 1822 by Freemasons, believe it or not, who wanted to establish a Puerto Rico republic. And instead of being San Juan as the capital, it would be Mayagüez, because the first Freemasons in Puerto Rico were in Mayagüez. And Simon Bolivar, the liberator of Latin America, also had plans with Guadalupe of Mexico to liberate Cuba and Puerto Rico, but sadly Simon Bolivar died before that even happened. And there was also the revolution of 1868, the Cry of Lares by Ramon Emeterio Betances, who was an anarchist who almost successfully established a confederacy of the Antilles where Cuba, Puerto Rico, Haiti, Dominican Republic, the Bahamas, and Jamaica would be unified as a confederation. He actually helped liberate Cuba. He actually convinced the United States to not colonize, to not annex the Dominican Republic. He was a doctor who helped end the cholera pandemic in Haiti, etc. He was a liberator in the Caribbean. And he was also in the Paris Commune as well. So fun fact. Oh, and there was also right before this, the last revolution under Spanish rule was the Intente Cupayauco by Aguila Blanca, which is another revolution that happened around this same year. And a month after the United States established a colony in Puerto Rico, there were 400 peasant revolts throughout the island for independence. So people don't talk about that. He's ignoring the part that a year or two before this happened, we actually achieved our independence somewhat using the Carta Autónoma. We should achieve our autonomy. Same way how Canada and Australia, for example, are independent countries, but you still had the Queen of England as the head of state. Like that, we actually achieved that like a year or two before this happened. So we were technically independent. And according to international law, you were United States invaded an independent country, which was Puerto Rico. And actually, a few weeks ago, the United Nations they were having this exact argument by the representative of the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico. And last year, July of last year, the United States has admitted in Supreme Court, and the quiet part out loud, we want to maintain Puerto Rico as a colony. You see the insular cases, which is racist in nature, because according to the insular cases, because the majority of the people are now white, they are incapable of self-determination. That's in the books, and they are using that as recent as last year. Because they were interested to annex the island as far back as the second U.S. president, John Adams. He was as far back as the second U.S. president who wanted to use Puerto Rico for military purposes because it was strategically located between the old world and the new world. It's a bridge between the old world and new world before airplanes were a thing. Yeah, there were military governors. Many of them were fascists. And they used dictator. I already did a video about dictatorships in Puerto Rico, about every single basically dictator throughout the island, which was practically all of them. And some of them, like William Wisdom, who did the Ponce Massacre, was affiliated with the Falangist fascists, which were like this fascists who were allied for Francisco Franco in Spain. And also, some of these governors before they became governors of Puerto Rico, massacred indigenous people like the Woodeny massacre, or Wincher, who was involved with the assassination of Augusto Santino, the revolutionary hero of Nicaragua. Yeah, he, let's see, if we mention this detail. Okay, Yeah, but at one point, 40% of the island belonged to him. It was a feudalism, and it was a banana republic. We didn't start moving away from feudalism till 1954 when we started to industrialize. We were actually one of the richest countries in the world if we had that wealth to ourselves. During the 1930s, during the Great Depression, if all the money the US stole from us, if we kept it to ourselves, we could have been the sixth richest country in the world. They still do, by the way. And because of that, like, we are forbidden to do businesses with other countries without US approval, and we have to pay the taxes. We actually pay 200% more taxes than the United States, despite being twice as poor as Mississippi, the poorest state in the United States. And technically, these laws goes against with their other previous laws they have for shipment and stuff. I can't remember which one in particular, but I know it goes against one of the federal laws, but they ignore it all the time for convenience sake. 40%. Yep, during the Americanization process, it was illegal. I repeat, it was illegal to teach Spanish in school. And I don't know if he's going to mention that. I hope he will. It was also illegal to own a Puerto Rican flag. You will be considered a terrorist, and the punishment was 10 years in prison. And it was also illegal to sing the national anthem of Puerto Rico, which was written by a woman poet named Laura Rodriguez de Tio. Yeah, they gave us U.S. citizenship 1 month before we went to war, and if you didn't want to be a U.S. citizen, you go to jail. Not only because of racism and also misogyny, but also religious discrimination because the majority of Puerto Ricans are Catholics, and the second largest religion, when I say second largest, I'm talking about like 1% or 1.5% or Spiritismo, which is a variation of Spiritism, which is a mix of Catholicism and spiritualism and like indigenous Taino religion, which, if you're from a Protestant background, especially United States, which is mainly Episcopalian or Presbyterian background, yeah, you're gonna see that in a more negative light. We still pay under the minimum federal wage. If you're under the age of 25, you are paid half the federal minimum wage. Even though it's supposed to be illegal, but because the Constitution doesn't apply, like he said, they can get away with it. Because it's also a tax haven. Many rich people go here, settle here, and so they don't have to pay taxes. Logan Paul. Yeah, and also taxation without representation. The whole reason American Revolution happened, yeah, they do the same thing to us. How the irony. Oh, for fuck's sake. Wanna skip? Oh yeah, that's also another part I forgot to mention. The Puerto Ricans were the last second-grade group in the U.S. Armed Forces, the Boricuas in the Colonial War, which one of my family member was a member of. And also, when it got to every American war, they always, an unwritten rule, like an unofficial doctrine, pretty much. The Puerto Rican soldiers will always be first in the front lines, then the African Americans or any other racial minority, and then the whites. You may not know that, but that is a quiet practice. Well, he skipped a lot of things. For example, he was the first Puerto Rican who graduated from Harvard. That's one. He had support and allies from the Bengali independence movement, the Indian independence movement, the Irish independence movement. He was actually one of the co-authors of the Irish Constitution for Independence. He has support from basically the entirety of Latin America, from anarchists, communists, socialists, conservatives, liberal, and even fascists. Like he has support from everybody. Like that's how strong the independence movement was. That everybody agreed, regardless of the political affiliation, you will support independence for Puerto Rico, at least in Latin America. He also forget that before this happened, we almost got independence by the provincial United States when during the governorship Jesus Pinheiro, the United States actually gave a resolution like if you sign this, basically speaking, if you sign it, we give you independence, right? The only time when the United States willingly will give up its island, but Luis Muñoz Marin, who eventually became the first electorate governor of Puerto Rico, which actually was a scam, it was rigged actually. Yeah, like only like a third of the population actually vote, and the majority of the people were already arrested because this was after the revolution. And so like there was a lot of lies and deceit behind it. So it was a rigged election, and he was the person who convinced the United States to not bring the paper here to give independence. Like the only time we could have independence with U.S. permission, he cock block us. Yeah. And remember, despite the name of the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico, the Federalismo Campo was basically the leader of it was actually internationalist in nature, supporting independence movements in Korea, India, the Philippines, Bengal, Ireland, etc. And he was heavily connected with socialism, he was closely allied with the Communist Party of Puerto Rico, the Communist Party of the United States of America, and also like the Communist Party of Cuba, the Socialist Party of Argentina. He actually have allies with Salvador Allende, for example, and a couple of presidents of Argentina, and etc. And he was also Freemason, so he has a support for the Grand Lodge of Puerto Rico, and and the International Committee of the Olympics, who give Puerto Rico as their own team, implicitly, indirectly acknowledge it as its own independent country, even though they couldn't like intervene openly because there are like anti-politics policy, which is bullshit. And his wife was a Marxist Lenin who actually worked with the Cuban government post Cuban Revolution of Fidel Castro. before I continue, I will put links in the description of books to give you a better understanding what actually happened in Puerto Rico because he's skipping a lot and it's almost whitewashing a little bit. Like for somebody, it's like, oh, this like smart Puerto Rican protesting, and stuff. But reality was more violent by the U.S. doing state-sponsored terrorists and death squads. He only showed like 2 or 3 images of the Ponce massacre and one newspaper about the bombing of Utuado. That's about it. Which he actually tried to do. He actually killed multiple people. He wasn't the only one, by the way, who injected tuberculosis and cancer to Puerto Rican patients without their consent. This is not the first time in history that he was experimentation by the U.S. government. This is the most well-known one. That happened. There were multiple cases up as, even up to the 1970s. And remember, when he got exposed by the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico, he got promoted as the chief chemist of the U.S. Army. He got promoted, and this is before World War II. Oh, by the way, he actually worked with the eugenics program, especially from the Rockefeller family. So there's that. Wait, this is the 60s. You're showing clips of the 60s, so it's like this is not pre-World War II era. Yeah. That's the Rio Piedra massacre, by the way. That's the Ponce massacre. The building itself is going to crumple down. It's going to be demolished. So this historic building, like on the left side, will not exist anymore. I went there, and you can still see the bullet holes when they did the massacre. And there's like a plaque which shows you every single person who died in this massacre. Mm. Oh yeah, this image. If you don't understand the context, they took a photo looking at the sky because they want to sell a lie that, oh, the reason we start shooting because there was a sniper in the district. There was no sniper. They literally did the massacre, took a photo, and sell the newspaper of a made up story to justify the massacre. Because they already have pre-recorded radio news before the massacre even happened to blame the nationalist terrorists to justify the massacre. Like they already pre-planned this to murder people. Oh, and they also made a movie called Revolución de Infierno, which I will put it on YouTube. Well, not put it on YouTube, I put it in the description. And the reason after they did this, the independent movement went down significantly support because every single time people doing trying to do a protest after the Postal massacre, the police come in with weapons, threatening them to do another massacre. That many people just out of pure terror stop supporting the band altogether, because every single time from the 1930s up to the 1950s, somebody trying to do a protest, the police were already with guns threatening them. We gotta do another massacre. We gotta do it again. We're not afraid to kill you. We're not afraid to kill your children. It's like that was their psychological warfare. I remember this island is not used to violence, so anything that is considered violent at least this time period was shocking, let alone a massacre. Oh yeah, they do experimentation. For example, Agent Orange, the famous like gas thing to destroy crops and stuff in Vietnam, they actually tested in the island Puerto Rico, which many people die because they were exposed by the chemicals and other things they have in the island. Yeah, there's that, without their consent, by the way. Technically, he's talking about the FBI, but the time period, this is like before the FBI was even a thing, so this is like precursor. But eventually, the FBI will get involved when it was first formed. Yeah, because they have files of every single person who considered a threat. Which, by the way, for a population of 3 million people, they have files up to 2 million people. So literally, the over 90% of the population, pretty much. Yeah, this is like the closest we ever gonna get to a literal real life George Orwell 1984, where they know about everything. We experienced that, and by the way, we still experience this. You can still have a chance to have a carpeta. You can still have it. Yeah, the average Puerto Rican who had their own FBI document, by when they were spying on average, the average person has around 20 pages. So there's that. base. Yeah, they did that to my great grandfather, my great uncle, and multiple family members. I think my grandma as well, who was also a victim of a eugenics program of forced sterilization, called La Operación in the 70s. Mm. Oh, yeah, and also, don't forget death squads, state sponsored terrorism, massacres, assassination, disappearance. Oh, one time they put a bomb in a daycare center because the daycare center belonged to the Socialist Party of Puerto Rico, and many future governors and senators who were part of the pro-statehood Party of Puerto Rico were members of these death squads and these terrorist groups who were against the independence movement, by the way. I mean, officially, they ended the program of surveillance, terrorism, all that in the 1990s. But there are many people who still believe they're still going on right now. Bro, you forgot about the West Virginia coal mine wars? They bombed union workers in Virginia. It's like, the fuck are you talking about? Or what about the that in Puerto Rico, Vieques? They bombed every single day for decades at a time by the U.S. Navy, the largest naval base outside the United States. Which, by the way, we successfully kicked them out. Kicked them out of the island. Or that's bullshit. Este. And you also forget like the U.S. military also committed a massacre during the Revolution called the Otuado massacre. And torture the revolutionaries in prison, doing human experimentation and stuff like that, and bury them alive with bed bugs, beating the shit out of them, stabbing them, etc. And with better reason, they burn him alive with radiation. And also, the goal of the revolution was to give attention to the United Nations, to convince the United States to give up its colony. The problem was the United States is the United Nations. They're in charge, so they intentionally turned the other cheek, pretending this never happened, despite full well that what was going on. You gotta ignore the fact they also trying to assassinate the U.S. president, the revolutionaries, and during the same week. Forget what I said. 100,000. Like I said earlier, we have up to 2 million people in a population of 3 million of the island. We talk about the majority of the population. And even to this day, even though the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico is a legal party, they're not allowed to participate in the election or anything. It is still the largest political party on the island. A political party to support independence and socialism, and to be more specific, Marxism. And like he's talking about up to 1954, so everything after that is going north. The war we went against the United States, a low scale insurgency, guerrilla warfare against the United States, which is still going on technically speaking. Which the United States never successfully military defeated the Motherland, which is a revolutionary group that led the armed revolutionary struggle for independence, and they did the biggest attack against the U.S. Air Force in history of the U.S. You know, they attacked the FBI, they attacked multiple federal buildings. They were considered by the FBI's own admission out of all radical groups throughout the 60s and 70s, like the Black Panthers, you know, the American Indian movement, the Chicano movement, etc. The Puerto Rican independent movement, especially the Macheteros, was considered the most dangerous group of them all, period. Okay, they're going to ignore that I mentioned earlier. Also, the Cerro Maravilla massacre, more disappearances, assassination, death squads, etc. Like, yeah, I gotta put in the description like books. They go into more detail about these things. Or in 2020, the 2020 election, for the first time in 70 years, 2 months before the election, they did a survey whether or not you want Puerto Rico to be independent, colony, or statehood. And for the first time in 70 years, the independent option won. And 2 months later, when the actual elections came in, the independence option was removed from the election for the first time in history. That's 2020. So, there's that. It shows you they're still doing bullshit. I mean, like I said earlier, like before Spanish America, we were technically were independent for a year or two before the United States invaded. No, it's not here debate. Like I mentioned, there's a survey as research 2020 for the first time in decades that the independence was very favorable, and every single year since the 1970s, we go to the United Nations to talk about independence, and they have a debate, and they vote which option was superior. For the past 40 years straight, undefeated streak, the independence position won out in the United Nations debate every single year, 40 years straight, undefeated. There was one time, and I think it was the 60 or 70, where China, you know, they were doing a voting whether or not Puerto Rico should have independence or not, and China, this is during Mao Zedong's rule, vote against independence, should maintain a colony. Which, you know, if China at the time would have voted, they could have given us a favor for legitimacy, but fucking counter revolutionary opportunism. I mean, the closest we could get to independence that will not suffer much of the consequences of imperialism will be combat of free associations, which is what like the Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, and the other one in the Pacific, where you have your independence, but you still have American benefit. You can still be American citizen, and they financially aid you to improve your country. So it's like a win-win, you know. But so far, I don't see anybody actually promoting that yet. Like you have to really convince the legal side of things. Maybe fun fact. This is more fun if you're a fan of combat sport. When it comes to boxing, Puerto Rico is the only country in the world that has champions in every single division and weight class, and every single category. We're the only ones that have champion in all categories. So. Oh yeah, I saw this happen. Like the hurricane was considered the if I'm not mistaken the fourth most deadliest hurricane in human history when it comes to how many people die. You know, it's the and also like he's talking about mainly in Puerto Rico. So in the U.S. they have their own problem. Like for example, the prison Alacan massacre, which is like considered the sixth deadliest prison massacre in human history when it comes to how many people die, and the main target were Puerto Ricans and African Americans. Well, I had not much to contribute because I was talking throughout the video. So, like I said, in the description, reading recommendation, maybe some documentaries about actual history of it. Like, subscribe, share. Hope see you guys next time.